Hello everyone, I hope you had a great Thanksgiving weekend. As we started in class, we're going to continue with our rocky shore, maybe a Lake Superior shore with all this agate rocks. And what we're going to do is I provided a reference photo and a tracing. If you want to trace at the rocks at the front, if you're drawing it, should be bigger. And gradually they get more and more shallower as you get towards the back. And then we have a beautiful shape. Make sure it's a nice roller coaster for the wave crashing against the rocks. And these little marks here are just rocks that might be showing through the wave. And once you've copied the drawing on, there is something, this is our focal rock. This rock will be more pronounced than any other rock. It might be because maybe colors surround it, or it's a bright orange and black surrounds it. We just want it to stand out more than any other rock. Maybe we do this method. We use this beautiful mahogany color and put that there. Whatever you decide to do. And as far as colors, you can use any colors that you want here. I like the complementary color scheme here. We have our blues, our burgundies, and then our orange, some warms, some cools, lots of cools in this one, in fact. Whatever you want to use, we can use. So as far as products that we're going to use today, I'm going to use a spray bottle. And before we start, I'm just going to spray down my paints so that we wake them up. Spray bottle, 2 things of water. I like using these cloths instead of paper towel because you go through a lot of paper towel. And I ordered these on Amazon. They're really cheap. You get, I think, a dozen at least. And they wash incredibly well. I've been using this one for wiping off my palette, and it still comes out of the washing machine pretty nicely. So that's that. And then as far as brushes today, I'm going to use some Escoda Perlas. These ones are, this is a 12. I think this is an 8. And then I have a huge Escoda Perla. That's a nice big one. And I'm going to use some brushes for texture. This is a Fumu calligraphy brush. I usually use this brush for my mixing. It's just a Rockwell Chinese brush. And then that's probably about it, for at least for the first stage. How do we get this beautiful wave effect onto our painting? What we're going to do is we're going to mask this part, and we're going to splatter some masking as well. The masking fluid that I think works the best is masking fluid. It's just a plastic latex known as drying gum. And if your masking fluid gets dried out, you can also add a little bit of water, just a tiny bit, and see how that goes. The other thing we're going to use today is we're going to use a natural sponge. What is the purpose of the natural sponge, you ask? We're actually going to use the natural sponge to mask out the waves in the back, the crashing waves. And my advice is go for one that's not soft, like this one is. Well, they're all kind of soft, but I mean, this one doesn't have as much prickly edges and odd shaped edges as the other one. You're really looking for something with a lot of odd shapes so that when you do this with the masking, you'll put a nice shape on your paper. And the other thing I'm showing you today, but it's not plugged in, is if you're going to trace things, this works great because you can put your paper, that's your tracing, and then you just put your watercolor paper on top and it still shows through nicely so that you can do your drawing. When doing your masking, a good practice is to actually pour the mask into the lid that comes with it. And this way you can see the consistency, and it's not going to dry out the rest of the masking that you have. I've just poured it into my lid, and then I'm going to have a look at my my sponge here, and I'm just going to apply the masking fluid on the designs that I marked here. Trying to be as random as possible and use the shape that is there. And you don't have to cover every single spot either. Do cover some of these rocks. If they're partially covered, that looks great. And now the other thing I want to do is I want to spatter. All right, in order to spatter with masks, there's a few different ways. One of the ways I like to do it is get some good soap on there. And then take your masking, and we're just gonna try to direct it over here. Not much is coming off there. While I'm here, I'm gonna do these dots that I see splashing up. The other thing you can use is a toothbrush to put your splatters on, but essentially your toothbrush is toast once you're done that. But we'll see how this goes. I'm gonna try a different brush to splatter with. Now I'm rinsing this out in my water. After I'm done the splattering, I really have to replace that water. I can't use that water again. I'm just seeing if a little bit more water helps the splattering a little bit, but I'm not getting much time for the toothbrush. All right, I'm doing the same thing with the toothbrush just to see if I can help it a bit. And when I spatter with the toothbrush, I don't want to get the mask on the end here. I want to get it on the brush, but not a big blob on the end, because then it will just give you a big blob. Works quite a bit better. Very fine, but a lot better than what we had there. And we can combine a bit of that fine with some just drops of mask. Since this brush is quite wet, they're coming off nicely now. I want some of this mask to be running down in different places into the rocks, making little trails, and some of those trails lead into my focal rock. If you take the brush and go up and down, you're going to get more dots out of it. That's probably good. So it might look a bit too even. So see how these two are the same height. These two are the same height. So we need some variety here. This is going to have to come up a lot higher. And if you see any weird shapes there, just try to get rid of them. And then maybe we'll make this one part of this. Then those two won't look the same. Trying to make sure the shapes resemble dots more than they do lines, and just fill out some of these gaps here. This is one big blob, but we can also fix that. You just look at the shapes, and if a shape looks odd, just add to it to correct that shape. And that's it. So we're going to rinse our brush. If we still have some liquid mask, we can pour it back in. I'm just going to show you, this is the masking we just did, and this is the masking we did in class. So there was a bigger dots in class that dropped, which might be nice, and some of them dropped all the way down to the front, but either one is going to be okay. It's going to look different for every single person that does this. All right, let's talk about colors that we might want to use. If I look at the orange, I think the most vibrant orange you're going to get is one that uses pyrrole orange. So that's the pyrrole orange. And then if you add gamboge to that, where's my gamboge? Here it is. It's got a bit green in it, but you're going to get a pretty vibrant orange with that combination. It's probably the brightest orange that you can get. One of the reasons is they both lean towards warm, and if you mix two warm colors together, whereas the Hansa yellow leans towards green, and then the quin leans towards blue. So you could also try that. So let's do that just for experiment. So if we mix the quin with the Hansa yellow, we're going to get that orange. Yellow isn't quite as strong, but it's a nice orange as well. So you can use either one of those. I'm trying to limit the palette here so that it conforms to the palette we've all been using. So I'm going to stick with the Pyro with the Gamboge. And then because I did Pyro for my maroon, I'm going to do some Pyro. And then I'm going to mix that with a blue. And I think what I'll do is I'll try the Cobalt. So the Cobalt makes a nice maroon. You could also try that with the Pyro with Ultramarine. So let's give that a shot. Ultramarine. It's not quite as pronounced as this one here, I don't think. It's hard to see on the camera, but that creates our maroon. And then you can also darken every one of those with neutral tint. If we throw in a bit, oh, the neutral tint's got that into any one of these, it just kind of darkens it and dulls it down. So that is fine. And then we've got a lot of blues. I see a lot of cerulean in the waves in these rocks. So I think cerulean will be a good color. Let's add the Pyro to that. And you also get a nice maroon with that. So you could use cerulean as well. And then just for your dark blues, we can use neutral tint with ultramarine, of course. That creates a nice one. We can use neutral tint with cobalt. Cobalt and neutral tint. Need a bit more neutral tint, so that creates a nice dark as well. What colors are we missing here? And then of course you can go lighter with any one of these colors. So if we look at this rock here, it's probably just maybe a bit of cerulean with some water and maybe a bit of neutral tint here and there. So that's basically the palette that I'm going to work with for this. So if we repeat that, I'm going to use Pyro, I'm going to use Gamboge, I'm going to use Cobalt, Ultramarine, and Cerulean, because there's a lot of blue in here, so I'm going to use, and neutral tint, of course. So I could skip the Cobalt and just use Cerulean. I might do that. And then I think we're going to be good. So that's what we have. I'm just going to clean off this palette and we'll start as soon as our masking is dry. Now these clean up better when the cloth is wet. So I usually have a wet cloth and then I have a dry cloth of these. So that should do the trick. All right, so to paint individual rocks, the most important thing is to wet the entire surface first, because then the colors will flow together. You might need to erase a bit of your marks if they're really strong. So just have a look before you paint a rock or use a kneaded eraser on the whole thing to make sure that there's no pencil marks that might interfere. And it may be easier to do one color, put it in a variety of spots, and then do another color. Or you can go about it from bottom to top. The colors at the back should be duller, so less saturated, more water. These ones should be brighter, and of course the focal rock should be one of the brightest that you have there. So I'm just going to start with the oranges, and I'm going to do the Pyro with Gamboge, and I'm going to mix a pretty big puddle of that because I'm going to use it quite a few times. So let's add a little bit more Pyro, and then I'll probably mix my Pyro with I'm using my cerulean with that one. So those are very harmonious because they both contain Pyro. And then I'm going to take my cerulean and maybe I'll mix that with some neutral tint. So I'll have that ready. And then the other ones I'm just going to throw in as I go. So that's my mixing. I'm now going to take a brush, probably a bigger brush, because I want these rocks here to be very wet. I think I'll try to go left to right because I always find I'm putting my hand in my painting. So I'm wetting this rock pretty thoroughly because I really want it to flow. So that's that. And then I'm gonna, because it's in a corner, I'm just going to put in some fairly subdued colors into this rock. Well, the cerulean doesn't look too subdued, does it? And then my light source is coming from here. So I want the lighter parts of the rock. I'm gonna try getting that moved in a little bit. I want the lighter parts of the rock to show at the top there. So I can make this darker. So it would be a bit on the shady side. And because the rock is completely wet, it's painting itself. I don't really have to do too much here. I'm adding a bit of water here to just make sure I have a good highlight there. And that is that rock done. If I want a little bit more texture in it, I could add a bit more neutral tint. If you have a granulating color, I have a sodalite here. You can also add that and it will make the rock quite grainy. So there is rock number 1 done. So we move on to our next rock. I have to skip a rock because I don't want this one running into this one. So I'm going to go here and this will be my next rock. And I am going to do that with maroon. So it's quite a dull maroon because I had a lot of water in there. What I could do is what went into the maroon was pyrrole. A bit of pyrrole in here. And I believe it was cerulean. Put a bit of cerulean in there. And that's created quite an interesting looking rock. If I water down the pyrrole a little bit, I can just move it up a bit because it's not going to be all white on the top. So that will blend together and create its own color dynamic. I'm going to try to go from left to right. So I'm going to skip. Could get away with that, but probably not. I'm going to have to skip up here. And this one, I'm going to have a nice orange rock. If I want more yellow in that, I can always add some more gamboge. This makes for a very bright rock. And I notice I'm painting with my mixing brush again. I'm just going to rinse that. I'm going to need a smaller brush to create the dark. And what I'm going to use for the dark is that maroon mixture. So it's the dark in my orange rocks. I'm running out of the maroon mixture. So maroon was cerulean with pyrrole. Now this is a way thicker mixture because this is so wet and I want it to stick there. And I like the looks of that, so I might do a little bit more of that. And don't worry about these gaps. The gaps will become very dark spots. And just taking plain water and going along this edge to make sure I got it covered. And I got a bit too much water down there, so I'm just dabbing that up onward. So we've covered our bright orange. We've covered this kind of plain blue. That will dry a lot lighter. So I think we need to go very dark at some point here. And if this is drying, it's not quite ready. So I'm going to have to go up and let's just take some neutral tint. And I'm going to take a bit of sodalite, which I didn't let you know that I was going to use, but I am going to use sodalite with neutral tint in order to create some nice black rocks. So I'm using my perla because this is a small rock and I need to be accurate here. And I'm just going to take a watery mixture of cerulean, quite watery, and just put that in here. Do the cerulean first and let it just merge into the rest of the rock. And you can leave little gaps like that, like little spots. So we're using basically the same technique for all the rocks we just did, but there is quite a few techniques you could use. Let's try some dry brushing. So I'm going to take this mixture, whatever it was, I think it was cerulean and sodalite, And I'm going to do some dry brushing on this rock. So the trick with dry brushing is you've got to hold it sideways. In my case, a smaller brush might be the better option. So it's a small rock. And you just let the brush touch the paper and make its marks. Try not to get into the other spot. It's not making too many marks. I'm just going to try dabbing more. Oops, I got a bit of red in there. Well, let's go with that. So there's some dry brush effects. I don't want to run into this orange, so I'm going to leave a little bit of gap there. But I can run over here. Pick up some more Sodalite, try to hold my brush on its side. So create some interesting textures if you dry brush. Sometimes it helps to move faster with dry brush too. Well, that's what we got there. An interesting approach. And then maybe we'll just soften it a bit on the bottom edge by putting a bit more water. Oops, too much paint. Just a bit of water. Now, the other thing you can do with dry brush is you can do it after you paint the rock. So once the rock is dry, let's say for this rock, we want to put some dry brush on it. Then I'm just going to take, that is still wet. So it's not dry brush at all. Something like that. Next, so I didn't really like the orange that was produced there, so I put too much yellow into it, I think. This is dry, so I'm going to wet this one down. So I want to do another orange somewhere. This part here is probably going to be off the page, but I always make sure that I fill that in. So let's just go pure orange. So that was my mixture of gamboge and pyro. I added a tiny bit more yellow again to that, but not as much as I did on that one. And the complement of orange is blue. So if I want to have a shadow towards the bottom of this one, I can add some blue in, and that will create a nice shadow. Use a bit of cerulean. Looks kind of green right now, but it is a complement to it. I'm just dragging my brush up and doing that. We could probably do a bit of that over here. And don't worry about these lines in between the stones. We'll fix those all up at a later stage. And I'm just going to peel off a tiny bit of that. That looks good. Working our way across. So we're going to have to take this one next. And we haven't done a maroon one yet. So let's do that. Maroon. Which one did I wet? I can't even tell. So this is my maroon. And now I'm going to add a little bit of blue into that as well at the bottom. All right, moving along. This one here, I think needs to be really dark because it's got two light ones right beside it. So I'm going to take neutral tint and Sodalite. And this is going to be a really dark one. The other benefit of that is I can cover some of this up where it overlaps. Now to make this look shiny, what I did is clean my brush, wiped it off on my cloth. Now I'm just going to go like this and create a bit of a glow to that one. And you can do that to every rock if you like, because it really does give it a glow. Okay, and if you like, you can add a bit of cerulean at the top, just on top of the glow. And it will make it look a little bit like it's standing out and it's glossy. I did notice that this here is not quite right. Let's just fix that. Now in the picture, there is a lot of dark blue. So I'm going to just go with probably ultramarine. Let's use ultramarine. And we're going to put some Sodalite in there too. So it's a nice dark blue. And let's do this one here. I did not wet this beforehand because I want to make sure that I cover this edge with the blue color. It's probably fine like that. And this goes right off the page, so I'm not so worried about that. A tiny bit more dark down in here. This is going to be very dark in that corner, so I'm just putting that in now. Oops. So here I'm correcting the rock below it. Back to my blue, very dark there. And then I can just go in with neutral tint and a bit of Sodalite right in this spot here. Picture that, just like that. Just taking a bit out, putting That's the other thing you can do, is you can just drop in water in any one of these, and that water will create a blossom and some nice texture on the rocks. Well, I think this one has to be dark as well, but I think what we'll do there is we'll do the maroon. So that's Pyro with Cerulean and add a little bit of ultramarine. I don't think I mentioned earlier that I was going to use ultramarine, but I am. And I don't think I mentioned I was going to use sodalite, but I am. Okay, this brush isn't quite as big as it could be, so it's going to take me a long time to paint this one. I didn't wet this one beforehand, depending on what kind of effect I want to create. As you can see, some of them I wet and some of them I don't. Is my head in there? I don't think so. It's not. This line here is very important because it's going to shape the rock below it. Oops. It's okay, new shape for the rock below. All right, and this one, I think the effect I would like to use, first I'm going to put some blue and some gray over here. A lot of gray, neutral tint, a lot of dark here. Oops, cut off part of that. Oh, there's a hair there, that's the problem. And then here we're just going to bottle in some water, and I think that would be quite nice. And while I'm here, I could probably do this part here. I want this to be very dark. And when you do those little parts like that, just take a clean brush and dampen from the top and just touch that spot that you just put on. And that's going to make it look a bit more natural. And you do the same over here. And I'm just going to touch it from the top. Oops. Great. This one didn't really come out with any effect on it, so I think what I'm going to do is just put some more orange on this one. Spread that around with some water. Doesn't look too exciting, that's all. Good enough. All right, and you just keep going on and on from there. I will speed this up as I move forward through this. So rather than watching every single detail being painted, you can go back and see whatever you like. So now I'm going to show you how to do the same thing, but to start subduing the colors. So if we look at this one, it's dried nicely. So I'm coming to the background and I want these to be less saturated. So I'm applying a lot of water. I'm fading it out quite a bit. So they're more watery, less saturated. So something like that. And I'll do a few more here. This one here, my cloth is quite pale, as you can see, and it's going to be even paler when it dries. Do a cerulean one here. If it's too bright, I'm just adding a little bit of water. The colors are okay, so I can just do a really light. This one has a big blob in the middle of it, so I'm just going to do it really light. So it's got some mask right in the middle there, and then can't do that yet. I guess I could try to do this one here if I'm careful with what colors I use. So things first, I'm going to wet it, and then this is going to be blue. So it's a little less saturated, but more saturated than the ones right at the back. Oops, might have to saturate that a bit more at that part. Just kind of fade this out, that, and I'm going to have to get it a bit darker to cover up the orange here. The shape has to be right, and this shape has to be right. Oops, I think I'm putting my hand in something. Oh, that blue one. So that's the idea. I'll do one more at the top there. Maybe it's a black one, but it's a very light black. And this will give it a sense of depth. And let's see, I can do this one. Okay. It's still quite wet there. Let's see. So I'm using a very watery mixture. And this one is kind of brown. Okay. Right, and that's not quite dry, so we could do that really light. I'm just going to put a bit of cerulean here. So you'll notice how much more subdued the colors are as you get to the back. And it might look kind of funny right now, but you will see later on that it makes sense to have it like that. So that, we're just going to continue on and paint the rest of this.